The most dangerous man in Washington stopped a charity gala for a waitress. Not a senator, not a billionaire, a waitress with tears on her face and cheap shoes on her feet. And when he looked at her, the entire ballroom went cold, because everyone in that room knew one thing she didn't. If Adrian Moretti noticed you in public, your life was never going back to normal.
Eels. When the underworld king knelt for a mere server, the frame froze. The ballroom fell dead silent as Adrian raised his glass, uttering 6 impossible words. 300 of Washington's elites snapped their gaze toward the center. Eels. Lawmakers and ancient wealth. Standing under the blinding chandelier, quivering in borrowed heels, was Leah Hart. A girl who entered hoping to remain invisible, now trapped in an unforgettable scene. Eels. Tell me what city you are watching this heartbreak from. Down below, the elevator reeked of stale smoke. Leia pressed her pale forehead against the cold steel, desperately fighting for a single breath. Eels. 6 floors separated her from an elite crowd who never wept over a $32 prescription. She shut her eyes, counting down from 10, echoing the rhythm the nurses taught her dying mother. 10, 9, 8. The metal box lurched. 7. Eels. Her stomach plummeted. First time at the Carrington, a harsh voice cut the shadows. Leia's eyes snapped open. A hardened woman with painfully tight gray hair stared from the dim corner, balancing crystal glasses on her hip. Her tag read Margaret. Eels. Am I that obvious? Whispered. Eels. You look sick, sweetheart, Margaret whispered. It was a cold, jagged smile born of sheer survival. Do not utter a sound unless addressed, and if a man grabs you, smile brightly like it is a blessing and walk understand. Understood. Your name? Leia Hart. Margaret gave a slow, calculated nod. You pour the champagne. That means you drift like a shadow, never stop moving. You freeze in that gilded room, you become a ghost. And in this tragedy, ghosts get crushed underfoot. Eels. The elevator bell chimed like a death knell. Heavy doors parted, revealing a hallway soaked in opulent gold light. For one fleeting second, Leia forgot her tragic role. Then, the crushing weight returned. The nightmare had haunted her since August. Eels. She had returned from the diner to find her mother sprawled across the cold kitchen floor. A shattered coffee mug lay nearby, while a meaningless radio ad droned on. Sirens wailed. Doctors whispered. Eels. The agonizing diagnosis dropped like a guillotine blade. Stage 3, aggressive. Treatable, yes, but only through a miracle they could not afford. Eels. The cure required out-of-network drugs that cost the price of a home. The type where insurance executives mail polite, soulless apologies. Once a hopeful student at George Mason, just months from graduating, Eels. Leia abandoned her future the very next Monday. No dramatic weeping. She simply signed away her dreams in a sterile office and stepped into a bleak, colorless autumn. Now, the chill of November bit hard. 3 exhausting jobs, Eels, maybe 4 hours of sleep. Tonight was her desperate salvation, a sudden catering gig at the opulent charity gala, a fleeting chance at survival in this cruel theater. Eels. $800 for a single evening, all because another worker fell, and Margaret showed a rare ounce of mercy. $800 meant one more round of life-saving injections. It was the razor-thin line between breathing and grieving. Eels. Leia stepped forward. The ballroom gleamed like the polished inside of a pearl. Arched ceilings dripped with massive crystal chandeliers. A hidden orchestra played a haunting melody behind pure white orchids. Eels. Around her drifted women wrapped in silk fortunes, escorted by men wearing tailored armor that radiated absolute, untouchable power. Eels. Let us look closer at the details. The scent of the room hit her like a physical blow. It breathed pure wealth, rich leather, intoxicating perfume, and perfectly engineered air. She grabbed a tray of 12 champagne glasses. Eels. She mirrored Margaret's harsh lesson, placing her trembling fingers flat underneath, her shoulders rigid. She stepped onto the grand stage. You and I know this kind of tragic invisibility. In this theater of power, Eels. A servant in black and white was merely a prop. A powerful politician could brush past her, completely blind to her tear-stained face, viewing her only as a moving table. Eels. That was her entire existence. And deep down, Leia welcomed the numbness of being invisible. She floated through the blinding lights, extending her tray. Elegant women pinched crystal glasses without even pausing their shallow gossip. A heavy Eels. Flush-faced man snatched a drink and casually slapped her hip. Her body tightened, but she forced a radiant smile. Margaret's desperate rule of survival. She kept drifting. Halfway through her next lap, a cinematic shift seized the room. Eels. It was not a sudden noise. She would replay this moment at 4 in the morning, listening to the ticking fan. The music did not fade. Eels. The murmurs continued, but the atmosphere warped, dropping in pressure like the eerie amber light before a violent storm. Drawn by an unseen gravity, she turned toward the grand entrance. Adrian Moretti did not merely walk into his nature. No loud announcements. No loud announcements. He just fell upon them like dark weather, forcing every soul in the ballroom to bend to his quiet dominance. Standing around 6'2", his damp, dark hair framed a jawline carved from merciless stone. Eels. His charcoal suit clung to his powerful frame like a second skin, the collar casually open. Laia could not see his eyes from afar, but she felt their chilling weight. The aristocratic crowd instinctively averted their gaze, Eels, terrified of catching his attention. 2 silent enforcers trailed him, projecting lethal intent without saying a word. Nearby, a socialite dripping in massive diamonds leaned over to whisper, "I never thought he would actually show." "Do not stare, Eels." "Patricia." Laia kept her head down and slipped past. She refused to look at Adrian. Her trembling instincts screamed that this king of shadows was a predator. He was the kind of dangerous man who ruined lives. Eels, and locking eyes with him would seal her tragic fate. Eels. Not wearing this pathetic uniform. Not if she wished to survive the night intact. Escaping behind the orchestra, she fled through the service doors, desperate for air. Inside the chaotic kitchen, Margaret was screaming orders. Eels. Leia collapsed against the freezing steel counter, shivering. Suddenly, her pocket violently buzzed. She read the glowing screen, a message from the clinic. "Your mother crashed at 6:42 p.m. Stabilized for now. Call us." Eels. The blood drained from her face. Her knees buckled. "Oh God, no," she choked out. She dialed the number with shaking thumbs. The tone rang endlessly. Voicemail. She tried again. Just empty silence. "Heart." Eels. Margaret's voice sliced through the clatter. "Back out there now. Margaret, please, you need to earn your wage. Give it 20 minutes. "But it is my mother," they said she. The hardened woman paused. For a fleeting second, Eels. The bitter mask slipped, revealing profound exhaustion and unspoken pity. Then the iron wall slammed shut. 20 minutes, Margaret commanded. "I will cover your break then. But right now we have 300 guests and 14 servers. Move." Eels. Lamutely nodded. Fighting back a sob, she lifted 12 fresh glasses and stepped back into the blinding golden stage. Eels. Silent tears betrayed her. A single, glistening drop rolled down her cheek, hastily wiped away by her trembling wrist. The heavy tray wobbled, 2 crystal rims kissing with a haunting, fragile ping. Eels. She did not notice the looming figure until she was mere feet away. Her eyes had been fixed on the polished wood floor, desperately fighting to lock her shattering heart back inside her chest. Eels. Stick with me. This is the moment her entire universe fractures. When she finally looked up, she was drowning in the towering shadow of Adrian Moretti. He stood entirely alone. His violent guards had retreated, Eels, leaving a terrifying void of space around the king, and his dark eyes were staring directly at her. Eels. Let us frame the shot together. Leia's first instinct is to gaze blindly past him, just as Margaret trained her. This job is her only lifeline. She chooses survival. Watch it trembles. Just a fraction. Champagne, sir. Her voice is too small. She swallows hard, trying again. Champagne? His eyes, pitch-black pools, devoid of warmth. They scan her face, drop to the glass, and rises the drink. "You've been crying," he murmurs. It isn't a question. Eels. He states it like a man noting the rain on a gray afternoon. "No, sir. I'm fine, sir. You're not fine." The tragedy of her station screams at her to retreat, to fade back into the invisible armor of her catering uniform. "Excuse me, sir," she whispers, attempting to pass. He doesn't step aside, he doesn't reach out, yet his sheer gravity anchors her to the floor. The tray rattles. "What is your name?" "Sir, I'm really not. I'm not asking to be rude." Eels. "I'm asking because I want to know." Close your eyes and listen to him. His voice is shockingly soft, a heavy old-world cadence where every syllable is weighed before spoken. "Laia," she breathes. Stripped of defenses, she can't even summon a lie. Eels. "Laia Hart." He tastes the syllables, testing their tragic weight. Then a dark murmur. "Something happened before you came back out here, something bad." Focus on her face. The crystal chandelier blurs. Her mother. That terrifying voicemail. Eels. The $800 she'll lose if Margaret fires her for lingering. The walls are closing in. Eels. The grief rises in her throat, a tidal wave she can no longer suppress. "My mother." The word shatters in the air. Notice Adrian Moretti. He doesn't shift his weight. He doesn't look for an exit. Where is she? Sir, I really have to. Laya yields. He drops her name like a heavy stone on velvet, freezing her blood. Where is she? Home. Alexandria. There's a nurse. A drug reaction, they said. Nobody is answering. I can't. She is breaking apart, right in the glittering Carrington ballroom. Eels, gripping cheap champagne before a total stranger. Eels. Adrian's hand glides toward his tailored jacket. He draws a phone, wielding it with the quiet menace of a loaded gun. Tommy, he commands. Find the address of a nurse's line unanswered for 20 minutes. Patient name, Hart. First name, he looks at her. Eels. The lighting sharp against his jaw. Eleanor, she whispers. Eleanor Hart, Alexandria, Virginia. I want a doctor there in 15 minutes. The best we have. I don't care what he's doing. Send a private ambulance as backup. Eels. Give me a direct line to the ground team the second they arrive. Eels. He hangs up. 20 seconds, that's all it took. Leia stands paralyzed. Sir, I don't know you. I can't accept. You aren't accepting anything. Get your coat. Meet me at the service doors. My driver is taking us to your mother now. Fast forward. Eels. Leia will never remember running across the ballroom, but she will remember bursting into the kitchen. She'll remember grabbing her coat, keys crushing into her palm. She'll remember Margaret inhaling to scream at her and then choking on her own breath. Eels, because a shadow had filled the doorway. Eels. Absolute silence. Adrian Moretti, radiating the lethal aura of a crime boss, stands motionless among the dirty plates and fluorescent lights. Watch Margaret's face. Shock, fear, then a sterile, desperate mask. Mr. Moretti, he nods. Margaret, of course, Eels. He knows the manager's name. Miss Hart is leaving with me. Her pay is handled. I consider it a personal favor. Of course, sir. He extends an arm. His hand hovers just millimeters from the small of Laya's back, never touching. Just an invisible, Eels, commanding gravity, guiding her forward into the dark. Eels. He escorts her down a hidden corridor, pushing through steel doors into a freezing November night. A black town car waits. Who summoned it? We don't know. A driver opens the door. Adrian gestures her inside. The heavy door seals them in with an expensive, suffocating thud. How is this possible? She whispers to the ceiling. A plea to an empty sky. Adrian ignores her. The phone is back at his ear. His tone is brutal now. Talk to me. Silence fills the cabin. Eels. How long was she unresponsive? What did they give her? No. Tell him I don't care about hospital protocol. Put Dr. Rice on informs or he will deeply regret it. He cuts the line. The street lamps paint his face in harsh shadows. His eyes aren't black, but the rich, dangerous amber of aged whiskey. We see the deep lines of a weary man, maybe 40 years old. Your mother is breathing, he says softly. Pulse is weak. The nurse panicked over an allergic reaction to the infusion. That's all we know. Eels. A doctor arrives in 11 minutes. Let's stay on Laya. Her hands spasm violently in her lap. I don't understand, she weeps. Why are you doing this? He holds her gaze, a man staring into his own tragic reflection. Neither do I, he confesses. Eels. Not entirely. The scene transitions. The black car tears down the parkway, the Potomac River slithering by like a ribbon of oil. Remarco remains a silent ghost. Adrian says nothing. Leia simply watches the bridge lights bleed across the glass. Eels, fighting for every single breath. Eels. What does she have? He asks. She swallows the bile of poverty. Stage 3 lymphoma. We had a great treatment plan, but insurance denied the appeal. We had to switch to the cheaper generic. How much was the good drug? $4,200. Every 3 weeks. $800. Which is why you were serving tonight. Yes. Adrian turns his face to the glass. We catch a microscopic twitch in his jaw, the restrained fury of a man swallowing a curse against a cruel, indifferent world. Eels. Okay, he whispers. Okay. The word sinks into her chest like a stone hitting the bottom of a dark well. For the first time in months, her spine softens. He is carrying the burden now. The camera cuts to a bleak Alexandria street, her tiny brown-sided colonial home. The empty wicker chair mourning her father since 2009. The pale glow of the porch light reveals an unmarked white van idling at the curb. 2 men draped in black stand guard in the freezing mist. One holds a phone. Eels. Those are our men, Adrian murmurs. Don't be afraid. Okay, she breathes, clinging to the word like a raft. Marco opens the door. The brutal cold strikes her and she trips. Instantly, Adrian is there. Eels. His hand hovers at her elbow, a guardian angel refusing to make contact, yet holding her steady. She forces her legs to move, crossing the dead grass, pushing open the front door. The shot widens. Her mother lies on the couch, ghost pale but breathing. Eels. An Ive drip stands beside her. A man in a dark coat and wire-rimmed glasses. The private doctor is working with cold, absolute precision. Heels. A younger man sat nearby, his black case open, full of glass vials and tools Laya could not name. Eleanor's eyes were open. "Oh," she breathed, her voice paper-thin. "Oh, honey, I'm so sorry." Laya's knees simply gave out. Heels. She stumbled across the room, collapsing by the sofa. She buried her face in her mother's shoulder and let out one single, brutal sob. The sound of a heart shattering. Eleanor's fragile, see-through hand drifted up, resting gently on Laya's hair. Heels. "I am okay," she whispered. "I am okay, baby." The doctor backed into the shadows. Adrian lingered in the doorframe. He never crossed the threshold. Heels. He watched them, wearing a look Laya never turned to see. Even if she had, she would not have understood it. Adrian Moretti had not looked at a woman the way he stared at Laya Hart in 15 years. Maybe never. He turned heels, stepping onto the dark porch to leave them be. Dr. Rice had gentle eyes behind his glasses. His movements were careful, reminding Leia of every decent doctor she had known. He sat with her at the worn kitchen table while Eleanor slept. Heels. He explained the nightmare plainly. "Your mother had a severe allergic reaction to the generic drug they gave her." Heels. "It is incredibly rare. No one saw this coming. The nurse the agency sent was simply not trained for cancer care. She panicked, that is putting it kindly. She ignored my calls. She ignored everyone. She had gone outside for a cigarette." Heels. "Mr. Moretti's men found her on the porch." "Oh my God," Leia choked out. "I do not handle complaints, Miss Hart, but you need to call that agency tomorrow." Then he slid a crisp white card across the table. "My private cell." Heels. "If anything happens to your mother in the next 72 hours, dial me." Heels. "Not 911. Me. I will be here in under an hour." "Dr. Rice, I cannot," she pleaded. "I do not know who is paying for this." "Miss Hart." He tapped. "If there is trouble." "That is all for tonight." He closed his bag. At the door he stopped. "She will make it through tonight. The coming weeks are another story, but tonight, she is safe." Left alone, Leia stared at her mother's chipped mug, the tea turning cold. She sat there and wept in total silence. Adrian stood out on the porch. Heels. His coat was too thin for the cold, but he hardly noticed. He stared down the street. Nearby, early Christmas lights cast a ghostly blue glow across the lawns. Leia stepped outside, shutting the door quietly, hugging herself. "Dr. Rice is excellent." Heels. Adrian said, his back still turned. He said she makes it through tonight. "Good, Mr. Moretti." Adrian. The name felt heavy on her tongue. "I do not know what to say." "Do not speak," he replied softly. "It was a brutal night. Go inside. Sit with her." Heels. "I will wait here or leave if that is easier." Heels. "Both are fine. Why are you doing this?" He finally turned. The porch light caught his jaw, softening the hard edges. He looked exhausted, not just from tonight, but like a man who had been tired for years and finally let his guard down. "I told you in the car." Heels, he murmured. "I am not sure." "That is not an answer." "No, it is not." They stood in the heavy silence. Her breath formed little white clouds in the freezing air. He barely seemed to breathe at all. A trick of the shadows, maybe, but she noticed. Heels. "Can I confess something?" he asked. "Okay. I walked into that ballroom tonight only because I had to." Heels. 6 men in that room needed to see me. One needed a reminder. That was my entire goal. Stand by a pillar for 20 minutes. Drink nothing. Leave. Okay. Then a waitress passed by. Her hands were trembling. A single tear dried on her cheek. And I... Heels. He stopped short. A heavy breath finally escaped his lips, forming a white cloud. "I cannot tell you why I noticed you. I have no excuse. I watched plenty of people cry. Usually I keep walking. Why stop tonight? I do not know." Heels. "Maybe you should have kept walking." He actually smiled. Heels. The smile was so foreign to his face that Lalaya nearly stepped backward, a brief quiet shift that softened his eyes. "Maybe I should have," he whispered. "I suppose we will find out." She retreated inside, sinking to the floor. Heels. She gripped her mother's frail hand until Eleanor's breathing finally grew deep and steady. Once asleep, Leia stood up, her muscles aching, and peered out the window. The black sedan had not moved. 2 of Adrian's guards stood watch. The doctor was gone. Heels. Those sad blue Christmas lights still glowed. Adrian was leaning against his hood, phone pressed to his ear once more. Heels. Even through the glass, she knew he was not giving orders anymore. His body language shifted. Shoulders locked, pressing against some unseen weight. He listened. He spoke. Listened again. His free hand dragged violently through his dark hair. Then, Heels, the call ended. He stood frozen in the cold, staring into the void. Slipping the phone away, he looked straight up at her window. He knew she was watching. He locked eyes with her for one breathless second. Laya yanked the curtain shut. Feels. She brewed tea she never touched. Sitting with Dr. Rice's white card, she rubbed her thumb across the raised letters, over and over until her skin burned. Feels. Down the hall, the soft rhythm of her mother's breathing echoed. The rusted fridge hummed. Outside, muffled voices drifted in, speaking what sounded like quiet Italian. The clock read 11:47 p.m. You and I know how fast a life can pivot. Feels. 3 hours ago, she was just a waitress. 3 hours ago, her world made sense. Now, a top doctor's personal number sat on her table. Armed guards flanked her door, and a dangerous man stood in her driveway. Feels. Earning immense wealth and favors for a girl he could not even explain. Laya buried her face in her hands. Feels. Mom, she whispered. What have I done? Eleanor could not answer. She was asleep, alive, stable, breathing, only because a stranger picked up a phone in a ballroom and demanded help in 15 minutes. Laya stood. Feels. She grabbed her mother's worn cardigan from the chair, pulling it tight. She opened the front door. Adrian was still leaning on his car. He stood tall the moment she appeared. She is asleep, Laya said. Good. Feels. Dr. Rice said a real nurse must watch her tonight, not the agency one. She will never return, Adrian stated flatly. I handled the agency. Okay. Feels. I have a private nurse arriving. Catalina. She cared for my aunt for 11 years. Dr. Rice cleared her. Laya stared at him. A list of objections clawed at her throat. I cannot accept this. Who are you? What is the price? But the words died. Feels. Beneath the panic was a terrifying, simple truth. She did not want him to leave. Standing on that frozen porch, her mother dying inside, a stranger on the curb, she wanted him to stay. Why did you run your hand through your hair? She asked. Adrian blinked. Feels. Excuse me? Earlier on the phone, you were cold with the doctor, calm with the driver, calm with me. Then another call came. You grabbed your hair, looking like someone had just died. Feels. Who called you? He let the silence drag out so long she thought he would ignore her. It was my uncle, he finally muttered. We run a certain family kit together. His sources told him I was standing on a porch in Alexandria, Virginia. Feels. Guarding a waitress he had never met. He demanded to know what I was doing. What did you tell him? I told him I was helping a stranger save her mother's life. What did he say? Adrian tilted his head toward the pitch-black sky. Feels. A distant airplane blinked against the cold stars. Let us look closely at this moment, the second the trap snapped shut. He said, Adrian, you just made her a target. Adrian looked back into Laya's eyes, his expression turning to stone. And he is right. Feels. Let's watch this unfold. He usually is. That's the tragic flaw in him. Laya's pulse hammered low in her throat, a frantic bird. She pulled her mother's faded cardigan tighter around her shaking shoulders. A target of what? She asked. Feels. Of people who pay attention to me, he replied. Which is a lot of people, some of whom hate me, and some of whom, as of 90 minutes ago, noticed that for the first time in years there is someone I actually care about. Feels. Do you understand what I'm telling you, Laya? She understood. God, she understood far more than she wanted to. A single heavy nod. I didn't plan this, he said, his voice raw. I need you to know that. Feels. Don't think for a second I walked into that ballroom tonight, intending to walk out holding your fate in my hands. Feels. I didn't, he continued, but I'm holding it now and I don't know how to let it go. Then let it go, she whispered. It sounded like a stranger speaking. Go home. Forget me. Nobody has to know. Someone already knows. Then I'll disappear. We'll move away. Feels. My mother and I. Laya. The sheer gentleness in his tone was devastating. It was the softest sound she had ever heard, and it shattered her completely. You can't outrun the kind of monsters I'd need to hide you from. Not without my help. Then what? Feels. Then you let me figure this out. She nodded again, hot tears spilling over her lashes before she could stop them. He saw the tears fall. Yet he held his ground. He didn't cross the shadowed porch. He just stood there, Feels, anchored in the agonizing distance between them. Feels. He studied her face with heavy, unreadable sorrow. Go inside, he ordered softly. Sit with your mother. The nurse arrives in 20 minutes. My men are stationed at the end of your street tonight. You won't see them, Feels, but they'll see anyone who dares approach this house. Adrian, tomorrow I'm coming back, not as some stranger from a gala, not with a driver, a doctor, and a string of midnight miracles. Just a man standing at your door in the daylight, Feels, and I will sit at your kitchen table. I will tell you exactly who I am, the dark reality of my world, and the brutal price of loving me. And then, Laya, I will ask you if you want any part of this tragedy. Feels. And whatever your answer is, Laya, I will accept it. Do you understand? She understood completely. She simply nodded, the heavy dread stealing her voice. He dipped his head in a slow, almost tragic bow. Then he turned, heels, disappearing into the shadows of the black town car. The vehicle pulled away from the curb, sliding down the dead-quiet Alexandria Street before vanishing into the night. Laya remained on that freezing porch, clutching the wool cardigan, heels, staring at the empty road until the bitter chill finally forced her indoors. Cut to 12:23 in the morning. Catalina arrived. A stout, formidable woman in her 60s, silver hair pinned tight, speaking with a warm Puerto Rican lilt, heels. She carried a medical bag that made standard hospice nurses look like amateurs. Heels. She checked Eleanor's vitals with the grace of someone who had faced death 10,000 times. She offered Laya a warm smile. She made the girl a sandwich and watched her eat it. "Sleep, Mija," Catalina urged, sinking into the armchair with a paperback. Heels. "I am here. You sleep. Tomorrow brings a heavy toll. I don't think I can. You will close your eyes. I will wake you if the shadows shift. I promise." Laya retreated to her bedroom. She didn't bother changing. She collapsed onto the mattress, heels, still wearing that stiff catering blouse, slacks, and those cheap work shoes that had rubbed her heel raw. She just stared at the cracked ceiling. Beside her, Dr. Heels. Rice's business card caught the faint moonlight. She pictured Adrian's haunted eyes under that harsh porch light. His confession echoed in her mind. "I'm holding it now, and I don't know how to let it go." Heels. She imagined some ruthless uncle in a smoke-filled room, discovering his powerful nephew had just painted a target on a broke waitress. She shut her eyes tight. Sleep never came, but her exhausted bones settled. Her mind, however, heels, drifted into a dangerous, beautiful darkness, and for the first time in months she wasn't alone in it. Meanwhile, out in the biting cold at the end of the block, a black sedan idled silently. No headlights, inside, heels. Two armed men nursed bitter coffee from paper cups, their eyes fixed firmly on the empty street. Heels. They never spoke a word. They didn't have to. They were lethal professionals. Cut to a glass-walled office 32 miles away. On the penthouse floor of a skyscraper owned through shell companies, Adrian Moretti stood alone, heels. He gripped a crystal tumbler of amber liquor, staring down at the glowing city he had bled to conquer. His mind kept returning to shattered champagne glasses. He pictured the tracing tear on a girl's cheek, heels. He dreaded the looming phone call with his uncle, a war cry that would soon become his smallest nightmare. Yet beneath the violent tension, something quieter stirred. A fragile feeling he had completely forgotten how to name, heels. He kept replaying the thought, "She didn't ask me for a single thing." Through 2 hours of chaos, trapped in a car, standing on a freezing porch, she demanded absolutely nothing. He downed the liquor. The heavy glass hit the marble sill with a sharp, heels, fatal clink. Far below in the concrete canyon, a lone police siren wailed and faded. Then, dead silence, just the low hum of the metropolis, the steady tick of the antique clock, and the quiet dawn of a brutal, irreversible war. Heels. The inevitable knock landed at 9:04 on Saturday morning. Exactly 4 minutes past the promised hour Adrian Moretti had set. Heels. And exactly 3 hours after Laya Hart had officially surrendered her fight for sleep for the second agonizing night in a row. Heels. She had showered to wash the fear away. She pulled on faded jeans and her mother's oversized gray sweater. She tied her dark hair back, met her own hollow gaze in the mirror, tore the tie out, and did it over. Under the harsh fluorescent bathroom light, heels, she searched for the spark Adrian had somehow seen in that lavish ballroom. She found nothing, just a broken girl. Deep purple bags under her eyes, bitten lips, and the dull ache of a heavy tray still burning her shoulder muscles. In the kitchen, heels, Catalina had coffee brewing, the rich aroma filling the space. Eleanor rested on the sofa, a healthy flush returning to her skin. She blindly filled out a crossword, pretending not to notice her daughter nervously pacing the floorboards. Heels. "Sweetheart," Eleanor murmured softly, never lifting her pen. "If you keep hovering like a ghost, I'll have Catalina sedate you." "Mom, I'm serious. That man saved my life. And I'm not going to drop dead in the next 10 minutes just for dramatic effect." Heels. Laya let out a frail, tear-soaked laugh. She sank onto the couch cushions. Her mother just reached out and gripped her trembling hand in absolute silence. Eleanor Hart always knew exactly when her child needed comfort and when she needed quiet. Then, heels. The knock echoed, 9:04. Leia floated across the room, smoothing down the frayed wool of her sweater. She pulled the door open. Adrian stood there. Collar popped on a charcoal topcoat. Collar unbuttoned, no bodyguards in sight. Heels. He held a tiny pastry box bound in twine. His dark hair was still wet from the morning rain. Heels. Picture this shift. In the pale November light, he was an entirely different creature. The terrifying ballroom aura was gone. He seemed almost mortal now, just a tall, deeply exhausted man holding a pastry box. "Good morning," his voice rumbled. Heels. "Good morning. Can I come in?" "Yes, come in." He brushed past her, bringing in the scent of cedar soap and sharp winter wind. In the kitchen, Catalina stood up. She offered him a curt, respectful nod. Heels. The calculated look of a woman who knew exactly how dangerous he was, yet feared him not at all. Adrian mirrored the gesture, sliding the small box forward. "For Mrs. Hart," he murmured. "The almond ones." Heels. "Tell her I remembered." "Adrian." Catalina's stern lips twitched into a faint smile. "You are a thoughtful boy. I try, you do not try enough." "Also true," he conceded. On the sofa, Eleanor had propped herself up. Heels. She watched the heavy interaction with razor-sharp eyes. This mother hadn't been fooled by a man in 30 years, and she wasn't starting today. Adrian walked over. He didn't force a handshake or play the charming movie character routine. Heels. He simply stopped a few feet away and offered a deep, respectful bow. "Mrs. Hart, I am Adrian Moretti. I am very relieved to see you recovering, Mr. Moretti." Eleanor's tone was frail, yet laced with absolute steel. Heels. She raked her gaze over him, weighing the dangerous man in her living room with her daughter's tragedy written across his face. "I understand I have you to thank for the private doctor, the nurse," Heels, "and apparently half the armed guards in the Washington metro area. Mom, please, he's right there. He knows exactly what he did." Adrian actually smiled. It was only the second time Leia witnessed it, and just like before, Heels, it softened his brutal features into something beautifully devastating. "Mrs. Hart," he said softly, "everything I arranged last night was tragically overdue. Your daughter is an extraordinary woman," Heels. "She has been carrying a crushing weight that was never meant for her to hold alone." Heels. "Step into this scene with me, a masterclass in tension." Eleanor watches him from her pillows, her gaze razor-sharp in the dim bedroom light. "I am glad I could help," Adrian says. "You talk well," she replies. "Practice." Her eyes narrow. Heels. She tells them to go to the kitchen, make coffee, and talk, promising to pretend she cannot hear a word. "Understood," he says. "Good boy." She turns back to her crossword. In the doorway, framed in shadow, Leia senses something profound. Heels. Her mother has just weighed the soul of Adrian Moretti and decided not to doom him. Not yet. Heels. Cut to the kitchen. Leia pours coffee, desperately hiding the tremor in her fingers as she sets the mugs on the worn oak table. Adrian drapes his coat and sits, the old chair groaning beneath his weight. A harsh Heels. Golden bar of morning sun slices through the window, dividing the table like a warning. For a heavy, agonizing second, silence rules the frame. His focus rests on her trembling hands. Her eyes lock onto the rising steam. Heels. "Last night I promised to show you who I am," Adrian murmurs. "I am doing it now, without the pretty filters." Heels. "I want you to hear the brutal truth from me," he says. He grips the mug. The camera lingers on his massive, perfectly still hands, catching the jagged white scar tracing his thumb, a violent souvenir she missed yesterday. Heels. "My bloodline came from Calabria in 1922, he begins. 4 brothers forged an empire over 40 years. People gave it a terrifying name, but names mean nothing. By my birth, the machine was sprawling, ancient, and bound by blood rules." Heels. "Construction, waste contracts, transit lines, a chunk of Baltimore Harbor, and a darker port down south." Heels. "For decades, the cargo moving through those docks was painted in blood and lies. Less so now, but still enough to damn a soul." We see Leia grip her mug, her knuckles going white. "And you control this?" she asks. "A massive piece of it, yes," he confesses. Heels. "My father died when I was 26. My uncle wanted the throne. After a certain quiet conversation, I took the crown, leaving him the scraps. We maintain a fragile peace. Mostly." "Mostly?" she presses. "It means he calls me at midnight." Heels. "Warning me I make a woman a target by standing on her porch." Heels. The air leaves the room. "Have you hurt people?" she asks, the words almost choking her. Watch Adrian here. He does not flinch. He refuses to break eye contact, refusing to dress the monster in a velvet suit. "Yes, I have killed. I have signed death warrants." Heels. "Twice, a lifetime ago, my own hands were coated in it. 14 years since my last kill, not from sudden morality, but from power. Kings do not butcher their own meat. Hear me clearly, Leia." Heels. "I am not sitting in your quiet kitchen pretending my soul is clean. It is pitch black." Heels. She watches the ghostly steam twist in the air. Yesterday she thought she understood his darkness, but only the way one understands a tragic film from a comfortable theater seat. Now the earthquake is tearing through her own kitchen. Heels. ripping up the floorboards. Panic seizes her hands. She drops the mug heavily to hide the trembling. "Then why are you here?" she whispers. "Because I swore I would come," he answers. "Because I owe you the ugly truth. And because if you banish me right now, feels, I will walk out that door and honor your survival. Feels, I will force my uncle back into the shadows. You will return to the miserable, quiet life you had before I ruined it. My old life was watching my mother die because the medicine cost too much." She fires back, the tragedy raw in her throat. He absorbs the blow. "I know. Did you pay for her treatment yesterday?" "I will," he says. "I will fund every drop she needs, forever, even if you never look at my face again." This is not a silent transaction, Laya. If you order me out, the doctor stays. Heals. Let us pause and watch this tragic pivot together. Notice how he slowly rotates his mug, a quarter turn, studying the pale ceramic as if reading his own eulogy. "I am 41, he murmurs. "Raised since I was 9 to inherit a crown of thorns." Heals. "I am ruthlessly good at this. But lately the poison tastes bitter. For years, operating entirely in the shadows, blinding my own family to my moves, I have been washing our blood money." Heals. "Funneling our violent empire into legitimate businesses that can survive in the daylight." Heals. "Building a clean kingdom that a daughter, if heaven ever grants me one, could safely rule. I have buried this secret from my uncle, my soldiers, and the ghosts of women who shared my bed." "Why confess this to me?" she asks. "Because yesterday," Heals, "holding that silver tray, you were the first puzzle I could not solve. You did not cower like my victims. You did not orbit like the sycophants. You were just a grieving daughter, weeping over champagne, seeing me simply as a man standing in a room." Heals. "A devastating, beautiful shock I have not felt in 15 years. Heals. The camera frames Leia's absolute ruin, trapped by the terrifying weight of his confession. "Adrian, I am a high school dropout. I own nothing. I am violently out of place in your gilded, bloody universe. I do not even know which silver fork to use." "I do not care about the forks," he interrupts. "But your vultures will," she snaps, dragging a rough hand across her wet cheek. "That is the reality. Do not lie to me." Heals. He watches the tear fall. His massive hands stay anchored to the table. That agonizing, deliberate restraint tears her heart apart faster than any embrace ever could. "Last night," she whispers, "your uncle marked me as a target. A target for what?" "No polite lies, Adrian." He exhales a ragged breath, pinching the bridge of his nose like a weary general. "There are 3 rival dynasties breathing down my neck, barely held by a fragile ceasefire. Right now, one of them is starving for a reason to strike." Heals. "Any slip, any weakness, any beautiful distraction. When they discover I have publicly chained my soul to an unprotected woman with a dying mother, the wolves will circle. They probably will not shadow your steps.
Dangle medicine for your mother to twist you into a spy. And
If you refuse the velvet glove, the iron fist comes next. Do you feel the gravity of this?" "Yes," she breathes. "And worse, a faction of my own bloodline will revolt. My uncle I can muzzle." Heals. "My cousin Victoria is a different beast. He believes the throne is his birthright. If my devotion to you paints me as weak, he will trigger a war, not my chest, using your existence to justify the knife in my back. I know how insane this sounds, Laya. Do you?" He finally lifts his gaze under the harsh kitchen bulb. His eyes are steeped in a brutal, crushing loneliness, a frozen isolation worn so long it has fused to his bones. "Yes," he admits quietly. Heals. "So what do you and I make of this ultimate gamble? It sounds like I brought almond pastries to warn you I am a walking death sentence, only to beg you to stay. Is that your demand?" she asks. "No. I am carefully asking if you will look at me again. Not as your savior. Not as the mob boss paying the hospital. Just the man who found you in a ballroom. That is it. Share one dinner. If you say no, I vanish forever, and your family lives in peace." Heals. "Step into the scene with me. Let's watch the tragedy begin. If the answer is yes, then our conversations will only grow harder. That is the truth." Laya stared down at her hands. The violent trembling had faded to a subtle hum. In the background, Heals, her mother rustled the crossword pages, a hollow, theatrical sound. Her mother collapsed on the kitchen tiles, a shattered mug beside her. Cut to last night, an IV piercing her arm, her frail hand resting against Laya's hair. Heals. Cut to Adrian in the Carrington kitchen, demanding Margaret's loyalty like a cold general. Heals. She pictured the pale scar slashing his thumb. "Yes," Leia breathed. Adrian's hands against his coffee mug. "Yes? I want to see you again. But I can't let you out that door forever. I already carry enough regrets." Slowly, deliberately, he gave a single nod. All right, Thursday, he murmured. I will send a car, somewhere shadowed. Nova restaurants where I am known. I'll text the location. Catalina stays with your mother. Leia simply whispered, okay, Eels. And Leia, from this exact second onward, a car sits at your street's edge. A man watches your workplace from across the road. Someone monitors your phone. You won't see them, but they see everything. It isn't surveillance. It is absolute protection. You will learn the difference. Leia nodded. If you want them gone, say the word. This is no cage. He slowly stood, dragging his heavy coat from the back of the wooden chair. He paused, his pale fingers gripping the timber. Thank you for the coffee, he said. Eels. Thank you for my mother, she replied. He studied her in silence. The frame tightens as he slowly crosses the kitchen, stopping inches from her chair. No touch, just one heavy breath suspended in the air. Eels. Close enough that the harsh lighting caught the faint gray stubble he had missed while shaving. Leela Hart, he whispered, tasting the syllables like a secret. He turned away, his heavy boots crossing the floorboards to bid Eleanor farewell. Eels. She told him to drive safely and survive Catalina's pastry demands. The heavy front door clicked shut. Leia was left alone, framed by cold coffee mugs and a harsh blade of yellow sunlight cutting across her racing heart. Eels. The camera pans back to the living room. Eleanor did not glance up from the paper. Come sit, honey, you look faint. Leia collapsed onto the edge of the sofa. The newspaper rustling finally stopped. Eleanor enveloped her daughter's trembling hand. Eels. The older woman's flesh felt cold, paper-thin, lacking gravity, yet profoundly maternal. Leia shut her eyes, letting that frail grip anchor her slipping reality. I heard everything, Eleanor murmured. I know. He is dangerous for you, Eels, and he might be the greatest thing you'll ever know. Both are true. That is the tragic curse of men like him. Eels. Mom, what do I do? The room held its breath. Eleanor's thumb slowly traced a continuous circle on Leia's skin. The muffled sound of tires rolled past outside. One car, then another. I will tell you my thoughts. Eleanor finally broke the quiet. Eels. Then I'll stop because this is your ruin to navigate. That man entered our home because he has been suffocating in isolation. He saw a spark in you he thought was dead. He is terrified. Men of violence are paralyzed by softness. Last night, Eels, you pierced his armor, past the money, past the blood. You saw his absolute exhaustion. Eels. You and I must recognize the danger of this moment. Were you tired too, honey? Eleanor asked softly. Yes. Two exhausted souls colliding in the dark. It is massive. It will either be your salvation or your utter destruction. Eels. There is no safe middle ground here. Know this before you walk into the fire. I'm scared. Good. Leia buried her face in her mother's shoulder. Eleanor breathed in the scent of her daughter's hair, a haunting echo of the past. For one fleeting second, Eels. Leia was 6 years old again, hiding from nightmares, believing the world could still be fixed. Eels. I love you, Mom. I love you too, baby. The lens pulls back. They remained frozen in that embrace while Catalina worked silently in the kitchen. A slow bar of daylight crawled mercilessly across the wooden floor, cut to the street outside. Eels. A dark gray sedan idled, engines humming a low threatening note, its two shadows pretending to read the news. Thursday bled toward them, too slow, too violently fast. On Sunday, Leia worked her diner shift, praying her reality remained intact. Eels. It had shattered. Through the greasy diner window, she spotted the same blue truck from her apartment parking lot. Eels. The montage of her new reality begins. Monday, riding the metro to her second job, the coffee shop in Rossland. 3 seats down, a woman in a tan coat stared blankly at an unopened book. Tuesday, walking home at 10 p.m. from her final shift. Eels. Scrubbing floors at a dental clinic. Under the flickering street lamp, 2 men smoked silently by a parked car. As she passed off, offered a stiff, clinical nod. No eye contact. She didn't feel trapped by this cage. She felt something far darker. Eels. The terrifying truth was, the lifelong, suffocating paranoia of being a vulnerable woman in a sprawling city had simply vanished. The primal hum of fear was dead. Eels. She was no longer a solitary shadow on the pavement, not alone in the parking lot. She was guarded everywhere. The tragedy was how deeply she craved it. Wednesday night, the camera tightens as she dials Adrian. One ring, the audio crackles. Leia. Eels. Is something wrong? No. Can I ask you something? The men smoking on the corner, the woman riding the train. Yes. Will it always be like this between us? Yes. His voice clipped. Until the dust settles. Eels. Until the predators in my world realize you are not a weapon they can use to break me. Eels. And then it fades into the shadows, never gone, just buried. Okay, she whispered. Leia, you don't sound okay. Frame her standing by the gloomy apartment window above the dry cleaners in Arlington. Down in the damp alley, heels, a stray orange cat gnawed at the scraps she left every Wednesday night, completely oblivious to the fact that her universe had fractured. I am terrified of how safe I feel, Leia confessed to the cold glass. A heavy pause hung on the line. Say that again, heels. Adrian commanded softly. I am terrified of my own lack of fear. After you spoke of the men, the cars, I thought terror would consume me. Heels. I thought the lights would stay burning all night. They haven't. My sleep is deeper than it has been in months. I know armed men guard my door. I know a single scream summons an army in 90 seconds. Adrian, heels. This feeling is twisting me into something unrecognizable. It is not natural to crave this darkness. I must be broken. No, you are not. Yes, I am. Listen to my voice, Leia. You are 26. You have carried your mother's fading life alone. Heels. Starving for sleep, bleeding yourself dry across 3 jobs. Now, someone is finally bracing the collapsing walls of your life. That is not a sickness taking root. Heels. It is purely relief. Let yourself breathe it in. I spy is needing it. I know. I don't want to become the kind of woman who Leia. What if I fall in love with you for the absolute worst reasons? The silence stretched razor thin. Heels. Through the receiver, the faint, rhythmic ticking of a clock echoed from his immaculate glass office tower in Rossland, a fortress his family had controlled through shell companies for 19 years. Finally, his voice cut the dark. Leia, heels. My entire existence has been built on false affection. Men respect the violence. Women desire the power. My uncle uses me. Heels. I am not losing sleep if a waitress who watched me for 12 seconds and demanded nothing happens to love me for a flawed mixture of right and wrong. I have real demons, Leia. This is not one of them. Do we understand each other? Yes. Tomorrow at 7, heels. Dress as you please. Marco drives. Do not let the cold bite you while waiting outside. Okay, Leia. I am profoundly glad you called. The line went dead. You and I know how this ends. The final shot lingers on her. Heels, a solitary silhouette trapped by the window. Heels. Let us watch this unfold frame by frame, you and I. The orange cat finished its scraps, flashed its pale gold eyes, and vanished into the alley. Exactly at 6:57 p.m., a soft knock echoed. Enter, dark coat, dark hat. The scarred face of a retired boxer, he held the door in silence. She sat in the back of the black sedan, hands folded over a 4-year-old navy dress, watching Washington bleed past the glass into a ribbon of light. Adrian waited upstairs in a cramped Georgetown room. Heels. The restaurant possessed no sign. Leia would never find this unmarked door again if she tried. 4 tables. 3 sat empty. As she stepped into the dim light, Adrian rose. Navy sweater, white shirt, no tie. For one suspended second, heels, she did not recognize him. The ruthless boss vanished, replaced by a devastatingly quiet private man. You came, he murmured. Was I not going to? Heels. An older waiter, a man whose graying temples spoke of lifelong loyalty to Adrian, brought bread and water, then faded into the shadows. He pulled her chair. They sat. Heels. A single flickering candle cast a tight, warm halo over the white linen, the silver the delicate curve of her wrist. Notice what they did not say. No whispers of the Mafia, talk of targets or uncles or bloodlines named Victorio. For 2 hours, Heels, they spoke only of the ghosts beneath their skin. Her father, a history teacher, dead of a failing heart at 49. His mother, lost when he was 6. A face fading from memory, a voice entirely gone. Heels. They discussed a college book she kept rereading for reasons unknown. Heels. He spoke of the horse he sold at 17 to join the blood-stained family business, her morning coffee ritual, his refusal to touch anything but espresso, and barely that, Heels. Ever since a doctor warned him at 36 that his own heart would kill him long before his rivals could. Did you change? She asked softly. Some things. I stopped drinking whiskey. I walk now. Heels. I bought a secret house in Virginia that no one in my family has ever seen. A sanctuary where I cannot be reached. I am telling you because it matters. Heels. Why? Because I would like to take you there. Not tomorrow, but eventually if you ever wanted to go. Watch the tension in her body language here. Leia stared down at her porcelain plate, her throat suddenly seizing tight. She managed a single, Heels, rigid nod, completely unable to trust her own voice. Adrian caught the slight tremor. He did not push. He raised his glass of water and gently shifted the conversation to the stray alley cat. She laughed, a fragile, wet sound, Heels, explaining she named him Howard after a discarded Washington Post. Adrian offered a rare, genuinely surprised laugh. For the rest of the evening, they were simply 2 human beings in a room. Heels. When the night ended, Marco drove her home. Adrian did not follow her into the dark. Some fragile part of her had expected him to try. Instead, he walked her to the car, pulling the door open himself. He lingered on the curb as the engine purred wheels, raising one hand in a still, solemn salute. He remained there, a lonely silhouette, until she turned the corner and lost him. Sleep refused to come, but for a completely new reason. Lying under a ticking ceiling fan, bathed in orange street lamp glow, feels, she just thought, oh no. Feels. You and I recognize this quiet terror. Oh no, she thought with absolute chilling calm. I am in very serious trouble. That realization haunted her as the clock bled from 2 in the morning to 3, then 4. He never touched me. No hands. Feels. No brush of the cheek. Not a single kiss. He sat across from me in 3 different rooms without reaching out. Yet he is the most physically commanding presence I have ever felt. I am doomed. 32 miles away, inside his towering glass fortress, feels. Adrian Moretti stood staring at a dark Washington he was desperately trying to rewrite. Feels. For the very first time, a cold, crippling dread gripped him. She is going to love me back. He had spent his life preparing for Greek tragedies, war, betrayal, prison, the knife in the dark, the 3 in the morning phone calls. Feels. He had never prepared for this. He stood frozen at the glass. A distant door clicked shut. A fading siren wailed. He pressed his heavy forehead to the icy pane, shutting his eyes for one agonizing breath. Then he turned back to the desk. Feels. His uncle was calling. Adrian Moretti's quiet week was about to violently end. Feels. The phone call lasted 11 brutal minutes. 11 minutes that changed everything. Adrian stood tall at his desk, remembering his uncle's old warning. A man who sits for bad news has already lost the war. Adrian Zoe, are you alone? Yes. Good. Feels. Listen carefully. I am not raising my voice. I speak only as the brother of your dead father who loved you dearly. I am here to deliver the blow. I am listening. A meeting is called for Sunday at the Chesapeake estate. Forced by Victorio. Feels. He has gathered the votes. Feels. 5 of the 9 votes. Benedetto, Carmi, Ricci, Santino, and I am so sorry, Adrian, your cousin Renata. Adrian squeezed his eyes shut. A family betrayal, Renata signed. The official subject, delivered by hand just 2 hours ago, Feels. Question the current leader's fitness to rule according to sacred traditions. The uncle's voice dropped. You know what this means, Adrian. I will ask you once. Is the girl worth this blood? Adrian froze. Through the glass, Feels. He watched the dark Arlington skyline, the Potomac River gleaming like a blade. Feels. A pitch-black seam sewing the city together. Miles away, in a cheap apartment over a dry cleaner, Leia stared blankly at her ceiling fan. Adrian could not see her, but he felt her presence like a freezing man sensing a distant fire. I am not. So listen, I met her 6 days ago. We shared 2 conversations and 1 dinner. If I claimed she was worth the war, I would be lying, and you would lose faith in me. Honestly, I do not know yet. But I know what she might be worth. Feels. I already know the crushing weight of wanting to walk away. But if Vittorio forces me out this Sunday, I will never discover her true worth. That would kill a fragile piece of my soul I have fiercely protected. A heavy, mournful silence hung on the line. That is the most honest thing you have said to me in 11 years, his uncle replied. But it does not save you. Sunday will be a slaughter, Adrian. Vittorio is not coming to vote. He is coming for theater. He wants the girl in the room. Feels. Look closely at this ultimate test. You and I. Adrian's fist tightened against the mahogany desk. No, he will demand it, but he commands nothing of her. Listen to me, the uncle warned. Refuse, and he will claim you are hiding her. Feels. He will brand her a pathetic secret too weak to face us. That poison will fill the room. But if you bring her, and she stands there for just 1 minute without weeping, without crumbling, his trap shatters. The entire narrative flips. The legend becomes, Feels. Adrian brought an outsider into our violent world, and she never flinched. Feels. Zoe, she works 3 grueling jobs just to keep her sick mother breathing. She has not eaten a proper meal in a week. She is 5'6" and has never faced monsters like Vittorio, Benedetto, and Ricci. You must decide if you trust her. Feels. Adrian let the silence stretch out, a director letting the scene breathe. Outside his glass cage, a lone helicopter tracked north, its red light pulsing. He pictured Laya's trembling fingers gripping her coffee mug. He remembered the fierce, Feels, unwavering way she had said yes at her kitchen table. Feels. I will call you tomorrow, he said. Adrian, yes. I hope she is real. Notice the silence stretching between them, a heavy, irreversible weight. I hope for all our sakes she is real. Because if she is not, this will break you, and I cannot protect you. Feels. His uncle paused, his tone dropping into a gentle, tragic surrender. If she is real, I will stand behind her on Sunday. You are my brother's son. Whatever you bring into that room, I will support. But you must be certain, Adrian, not hopeful. Certain, Eels. I understand. Good night, Napote. Good night. The line went dead. Watch Adrian now. He stands motionless in the shadows, his hand gripping the cold plastic of the receiver for an eternity, feeling the walls close in. Eels. He moved across the dimly lit office, pouring 2 heavy fingers of bourbon his doctor forbade. He threw it back in one slow, burning swallow, the glass clinking sharply against the mahogany desk. Then, driven by a quiet, desperate fatalism, Eels. He did the exact thing he swore he would never do. He dialed her number. 2:14 in the morning. Cut to Arlington. In the pitch black of Laya's bedroom, the phone screen cuts through the shadows. She is wide awake, paralyzed by hours of racing thoughts. Eels. She grabs it on the second ring. Nadrian. Good. Listen to the heavy pause on the line. She hears the hollow hum of his empty office heater, the lonely, echoing tick of a clock miles away. The tension is almost unbearable. Eels. I have to ask you to do something, he murmured. Eels. And I want you to say no if you need to. Know that no is a valid answer. I will give you the facts first, then the question, and you will take all the time you need. Okay. He laid it all out like laying weapons on a table. The mob summit, Eels. Vittorio, the estate at Chesapeake, the brutal reality of her presence versus her absence. He stripped away all comfort, offering only the raw, ugly truth. Eels. He warned her she might find herself trapped in a room with 9 of the most ruthless power brokers on the Eastern Coast. Men forged in blood. And one of them had already weaponized her existence, Eels, plotting to use her as the excuse to steal the throne his own cousin had held for 15 long years. The camera stays close on Laya's face, bathed in the harsh phone light. She just listened, Eels. She remained perfectly still. Lying in the suffocating darkness, she pressed the phone against her ear until the bone ached, absorbing every terrible word. Finally, a crushing silence settled over them. Adrian. Yes. Can I ask something first? Eels. Anything. If I refuse, if I say no. What actually happens on Sunday? He exhaled slowly. Vittorio claims I am hiding you. He twists that into proof that I am unfit to lead. He lacks the vote to strip me of power instantly, even with 5 of the 9. Eels. There are ancient, rigid laws to this game that I will not dump on you at 2 in the morning. But he will wound my authority so deeply that when he strikes again, he will hold 7 votes. Maybe 8. Eels. And if he gets 8, my reign over this crime family ends forever. Do you go to jail? No. Do you die? The hesitation on Adrian's end is thick, choked with shadows. I do not know. Probably not. Almost certainly not. Vittorio is not my cousin Ranatata, Eels, whom I loved, who signed a death warrant of a document tonight that will haunt me until I am in the ground. Vittorio is a cold breed. The sort who, upon taking power, might decide I know entirely too much to be left breathing. Eels. But that is the worst-case scenario. The probable outcome? I am stripped of my title. I watch 8 years of quiet, agonizing labor turn to ash, and I spend the next decade checking my blind spots before I open a single door. That is the reality. Eels. And if I show up, if you stand there for even 5 minutes without speaking a single word, Vittorio's entire foundation crumbles. The narrative shifts. His allies scatter. The summit closes with me firmly in power, Eels, and him nursing a very bloody lesson in respect. And after that, Laya, the waters will still. Never completely safe, but still. Long enough to finish my true work. Long enough, perhaps, Eels, to build a life where you sit at my kitchen table on a bright Sunday morning, arguing with me over breakfast. Notice the profound tragedy here. The camera finds Leia in the dark. She is weeping, utterly soundless. A single tear traces a glistening, Eels, desperate line down her temple, burying itself into her hair. Eels. Adrian, yes, if I do this, if I survive Sunday, what becomes of me? What do you mean? I mean, 6 days ago, I poured coffee for strangers. I sleep above a dry cleaner. My mother is sick, Eels. My sister-in-law teaches children in Pittsburgh and knows absolutely none of this. If I step into that lion's den, if Vittorio burns my face into his memory, my life as a waitress is dead, isn't it? I can never return to the diner on Clarendon Boulevard, Eels. Never go back to the Rosslyn coffee shop or scrubbing floors at the dental clinic. Whatever happens at that estate, the woman I was last Friday is gone forever. Isn't she? When Adrian finally spoke, his voice cracked with a devastating naked grief. Eels. A true cinematic heartbreak. No, he whispered, she is gone. Okay, Laya, no, hold on, let me finish. I am not saying no. Eels. I just have to speak this into reality. I need to hear my own voice. Because otherwise I will say yes out of blind guilt or out of this terrifying pull I feel toward you, a pull I refuse to name at 2 in the morning. If I agree for the wrong reasons, heels, I will walk into that room and shatter the second someone glares at me. I need iron in my veins. I need to know exactly why I'm standing there. Do you understand? Yes. Okay, my mother. If Sunday falls apart and I am wiped off the map, who protects her? Heels. She will want for nothing until her final day. Protected by me, my lawyers, through a trust-activating Monday morning, no matter what horrors unfold on Sunday. That is not a condition. It is a concrete fact. Heels. I need you to grasp that the ink is already dry. I finalized it on Wednesday. Wednesday. Yes. Before I even agreed to dinner, okay. Listen to her trembling intake of air, the sound of a woman accepting her fate. Okay, next. Heels. My true name. If I show up, does this end with Vittorio leaking my identity to the underground syndicate next week? Not the press, but whispered in very specific shadowed rooms. Rooms the outside world never sees. Yes, Heels. Your name will be carved into their memories. That is the sacrifice I am asking of you. Okay, give me a second. The scene stretches out, the heavy thud of her own pulse against receiver, the pathetic hum of her cheap refrigerator, the faint Heels, muffled cough of a man standing guard on the corner below. One of his soldiers. She realizes with chilling clarity that this hidden danger is the soundtrack to her existence now, whether she attends the Chesapeake meeting or not. Heels. Adrian, she whispered, yes. One final question, I need absolute truth. Okay. Do you love me? Picture the silence that follows. It is suffocating, stretching into the most agonizing eternity of her life. Yes, he confessed. Since when? Heels. Since you told me your cat was named Howard, despite the dread, despite the looming violence, a wet, startled laugh escapes her lips, a fragile, fractured note in the absolute dark. That was 4 days ago. Yes. Adrian, that is impossible. Heels. You do not fall in love in 4 days. Laya, my world has been desperately lonely for years. I have stood in grand rooms alongside women far more beautiful, refined, and powerful than you could ever imagine. Heels. Yet not a single one, not once in 20 years, made me smile over a stray cat. I am not declaring my love because I built a logical case for it. I am telling you this because tonight, when my uncle asked if you were worth starting a war over, I hesitated, Heels, and that terrified me to my core. To be brought to my knees by uncertainty over someone, that means I love them. That is the proof. She could not force a single word out. Her hand clamped tightly over her trembling mouth, stifling a sob. Heels. And I demand nothing in return, he continued, his voice wrapping around her like velvet in the dark. I am telling you because you asked. And if Sunday turns to slaughter, and I took this secret to the grave, my soul would never rest. Heels. So now the truth is yours. Heels. Now you can face Sunday with every piece of the puzzle without questioning the fire burning between us. I have bared my soul, that is all. The camera lingers as she nods into the blackness, a gesture meant only for herself. Okay, she breathed. Okay. Heels. I will come. Take the rest of the night. Decide tomorrow. No, my choice is made. I will be there Sunday. I will walk into Chesapeake at your side. I will stand my ground against them. I will try with everything I have not to shatter. I cannot guarantee it, Heels, but I will not surrender willingly. And if I make it out alive, her voice snagged on a ragged edge of fear. If I survive Adrian, Monday morning we will be having a very long discussion about the ruins of my life. Heels. And you will lay every dark secret bare. The brutal, unpolished truth. Yes, good, Laya, yes. Thank you. Do not thank me for stepping into hell. Just rest. You sound like a ghost who hasn't slept in days. I haven't, Heels. Then close your eyes. Good night, Adrian. Good night. She severed the connection, placing the glass screen face down on the nightstand. Her eyes fixed on the rhythmic, hypnotic spin of the ceiling fan cutting through the shadows. Somewhere near dawn, Heels. Exhaustion finally claimed her body without warning. When her eyes snapped open at 9 on Friday morning, she sat up, a strange, profound stillness washing over her. The die was cast. She felt no regret. The next 48 hours drifted by like a surreal, Heels out-of-body dream with Catalina arriving quietly each dawn. Heels. Picture the scene. Eleanor gripped her daughter's hand in the shadowed hospital room, asking nothing. Laya had already confessed Friday afternoon that Sunday meant a critical journey with Adrian, promising to return by nightfall. Heels, murmuring her deep love. Eleanor, a grieving widow who watched her daughter sacrifice college, lying near an intravenous drip just days prior, simply squeezed Laya's trembling fingers. You come home to me, baby. You come home. Heels. Cut to Saturday afternoon. A stranger knocked on Leia's apartment door, hauling garment bags and a steamer. Isabella, sharp-eyed Portuguese, carrying the weight of 50 years. She claimed she served a private tailor, Heels, bound to Adrian's powerful family for 3 decades. No probing questions, only cold, precise measurements. Heels. In the dim light, Isabella unsheathed a dress. Elegant, modest, the pale shade of dying winter wheat. Long sleeves, a high collar, the hem dropping just below the knee. She pressed it against Leia's fragile frame, giving a single heavy nod. "This one, Heels," she whispered. "Not black, not red, nothing that screams for attention. Tomorrow you step into that house as if it is your birthright. Understood?" Leia's voice barely cut the quiet. "I do not think I understand anything anymore." "Good, Heels. The ones who think they know the game are the first to bleed." For 2 agonizing hours, Isabella pinned the fabric tight against Leia's waist. She produced sensible, low heels and a delicate gold chain, an heirloom from her own grandmother. Heels offered as armor for the dark trial ahead. Heels. She directed Leia's body like a tragic puppet, how to sit upright, cross her frail ankles, fold her hands, how to stare down a man without a single blink. "You do not have to speak," Isabella warned, the shadows deepening around them. "They will demand it, Heels. They will force it. Silence in that room is your only blade. The first to speak bleeds power. Adrian will talk. Vittoria will talk. Let them." Isabella gently touched Leia's chin. "You sit. You breathe. Watch their faces." Heels. "Adrian will signal you when it is time." "Okay, one last thing. Men in that room will try to break you. They will try to draw tears. You do not cry." Heels. "You never apologize. You never beg Adrian for rescue. You stare directly at the man trying to crush your spirit. And remember, 3 months ago, you bled yourself dry across 3 jobs to keep your mother alive." Heels. "Ask yourself if these men know what true suffering looks like. They do not. They have lived their entire lives terrified of their own shadows. You have lived terrified of an empty home. You are forged from harder iron than all of them combined." Heels. Isabella vanished as the bloody sun dipped below the skyline. Left behind, the dress hung on Leia's door, a pale, quiet vow of survival. Slumping onto the mattress, Leia stared into the fabric's ghostly shape. Then she finally stood. Heels. She forced down a simple sandwich in the terrible quiet. She dialed her mother, wasting 45 minutes on hollow, beautiful nothingness to mask the fear. By 10, she collapsed into bed. Heels. Her exhaustion snapping her consciousness shut like a heavy vault door. Let's step into Sunday morning together. The Arlington sky hung cold and tragic, a brittle pale blue above stripped weeping trees. Marco arrived at dawn. Heels. He drove her to an underground Alexandria garage. Adrian stood waiting by a dark-tinted Mercedes, guarded by 2 nameless men. He wore a sharp charcoal suit. His face was a map of pure torment. The man clearly had not slept a single hour. Heels. His eyes found her, a muscle twitching violently in his jaw before freezing back into stone. "You look beautiful," he murmured. "Isabella chose it," she replied. "I know. She called me. Said I did not deserve you." I agreed. Heels. Adrian held the heavy door open. They slipped into the dark leather cabin. The engine growled, carrying them east toward the Chesapeake water, toward a doomed estate anchoring his family's violent legacy for 90 years. Heavy silence filled the car. Heels. Adrian clutched her fingers, his grip unnervingly steady. Leia watched dead, black trees blur past, battling her own racing pulse. Turning, she studied his fractured profile, the tragic line of his jaw, a tiny faded scar. Heels, the exhausted pulse beating against his temple. Heels. A brutal truth settled in her mind. I am walking into the lion's den simply to stand by his side. That was her sole purpose. All else was just white noise. The sprawling Chesapeake property was not the ostentatious marble fortress she feared. Heels. It was a massive weathered stone farmhouse overlooking the cold bay, complete with a private chapel and naked weeping oak trees. Planted in 1937, Adrian whispered, his breath heavy with dread. Heels. Vehicles sat like black beetles on the gravel, ominous SUVs and an ancient Lincoln. Silent men in dark coats guarded the perimeter, their eyes tracking the Mercedes. They offered Adrian grave nods, treating Leia like a ghost. At the porch, Heels, Adrian's uncle stood waiting, a phantom in the chill. Heels. He appeared smaller than the legend suggested, roughly 70, crown of white hair, a monstrous gold ring glinting on his finger. His eyes held the merciless gray of a frozen sea. Salvatore Moretti took her hand. Heels, dissecting her features with a chillingly calm gaze. "Miss Hart," he rasped, an old Italian accent smoothed over by decades of hidden sins. "I have heard much about you." He leaned closer. "You understand the danger inside?" "Yes, sir." Heels. You are not required to utter a single word today. Adrian will speak. I will speak. Vittorio will talk relentlessly. You remain absolute silence. Do you understand? Me. Leia's chest tightened. Yes, sir. And good. Yields. Salvatore held her gaze, testing her spirit before whispering into the void. Ah, you will do. He drifted into the dimly lit manor. They entered a cavernous hall, crushed beneath heavy wooden beams, ending in a massive roaring fireplace. Yields. Down the center lay a monolithic oak table. 8 hardened men. 1 lone woman. That woman, dark hair pulled tight, caught Leia's eyes briefly. Renata, the traitorous cousin who forged the documents. Renata immediately looked away. Heels. Shame tightening her throat. At the table's head sat Vittorio, a hulking figure, drowning in broad shoulders and a thick neck. His once handsome face had curdled into something brutal, flush with corrupt power and violence. Heels. Vittorio refused to stand. He leaned back into the shadows, savoring their approach with the sinister, hungry pleasure of an executioner awaiting the dawn. Adrian guided Leia toward the end of the table, drawing her chair back. She sank into it. Heels. Adrian flanked her left. Salvatore anchored the right. The seat beside Vittorio remained hauntingly vacant, save for a bloodless stack of legal documents. We will begin, Salvatore announced, his voice cutting the heavy air. Heels. Vittorio's lips curled into a terrifying smile. Cousin, he purred, a sickeningly warm tone that made every hair on Leia's neck stand at attention. Heels. Thank you for coming. And thank you, miss. Forgive me, I do not know your family name. Hart. Adrian growled. Ah, Miss Hart, welcome to our home. We are honored. Adrian's jaw clenched. She is my guest. She will not be addressed directly. Heels. Vittorio waved a heavy hand. Of course. I am merely curious. Perhaps you can answer, cousin. What exactly does Miss Hart do for a living? The room's tension snapped taut. She is my guest, Adrian repeated darkly. Then, piercing the dread, Heels. Leia's voice rang out. I am a waitress. The entire room froze into deathly stillness. Had she meant to speak? Isabella's warning echoed. Silence is a weapon. Heels. And she had just dropped that weapon onto the cold floor. But she had seen the vile, triumphant spark in Vittorio's eyes. The sadistic thrill of extracting Adrian's shame like pulling bloody teeth in front of the mob family. Heels. A primal instinct flared in her chest. No, I will not let him break Adrian. I control my ruin, Vittorio sneered, letting the word rot in the air. Yes, she answered. At what establishment, if I may ask? I am between jobs. Last week, Heels. I served at a Washington Gala. The week prior, a dirty diner on Clarendon, a Rosslyn coffee shop, and scrubbing a dental clinic floor every night. Heels. Let's watch this magnificent defiance unfold. I have done telemarketing, hostessing, even answered clinic phones, Leia continued, her spine steel. I am 26. Heels. I abandoned my university degree 3 months ago when my mother's body began failing from stage 3 lymphoma. Is there any other tragedy this table wishes to dissect? The suffocating silence stretched into eternity. Beside her, Heels. Salvatore let out a low, gravelly hum, a sound dancing on the edge of a laugh. Vittorio's plastered smile remained, but his cold eyes fractured. And how, Miss Hart, did you ensnare our Adrian? I was carrying champagne, she said, stripped of fear. Heels. He looked at me. I looked at him. My mother suffered an emergency and he saved us. Heels. Let's step into this room together. That is how I met Adrian, Lila said. Vittorio pushed. You didn't know who he was? You are absolutely sure? I had never heard the name Moretti before last Friday, she answered. Sir, I grew up in Alexandria. Heels. My dad taught middle school history until he died. My mom was a librarian. I do not run in your circles. I didn't know Adrian. She paused, turning her head to stare at Vittorio across that massive oak table. I do not know you either. I am sorry. Heels. Someone halfway down the table choked out a swallowed laugh. Heels. Vittorio's jaw clenched. I see, he said. I am sorry if I was rude, Lila offered. Not at all, Miss Hart. It is refreshing. But if you don't know us, and you are just a waitress with a sick mother, Heels, working 3 jobs with 0 ties to our world, then what exactly are you doing in our house today? This was the moment. The tension radiated up through the old stone floor. The entire room stopped breathing. Lila didn't look at Adrian. Heels. Isabella had warned her not to. She ignored Salvatore too. She locked eyes with Vittorio, and her voice came out painfully quiet, yet completely unbroken. Heels. I am here because Adrian asked me. Vittorio scoffed. That is no answer. It is the only one I have, she replied. I am not good enough for this room. We all know what I am. Heels. I am just a waitress who sat at a kitchen table 6 days ago across from a man who laid out his entire life without a single lie and asked to see me again. I said yes. Then he called me at 2 in the morning, explaining exactly what would happen today. Heels. Completely honest again. He asked me to stand by him, and I said yes. I am not here because I am worthy. I am here because a man who has been lied to his whole life asked a waitress a real question and did not flinch at her honest answer. And I will not. Heels. I will not. Her voice broke a fraction, but she ruthlessly reined it in. I will not be the reason he regrets asking. The silence was deafening. Vittorio stared at the documents, then up at Adrian, and finally at Lila. Miss Hart, he murmured. Yes? Heels. Do you love him? She didn't hesitate. She didn't even think. The question hit her, and the answer fired back in one fluid motion. And in that cinematic flash, she realized she hadn't actually told Adrian yet. Not on the phone. Not in the car. Heels. She was confessing it here for the very first time in front of 9 strangers. Heels. She wouldn't even remember deciding to speak. Yes, she said. Adrian sat perfectly still. He didn't look over, but beneath the table, his hand found hers and gripped tight. Vittorio studied her, a slow, dangerous smile creeping across his face. Well, Heel's cousin, he said. Congratulations. You found a fascinating girl. Yes, I have, Adrian replied flatly. We still have a matter to settle, Vittorio countered. The document here, the question of your leadership. Then discuss it, Vittorio. Heels. Adrian shot back. The floor is yours. You really want me to do this in front of her? Heels. You chose to have this meeting in front of her the second you dragged her into it, Adrian said. You do not get to call it inappropriate now. Vittorio's lips pressed into a thin line. Heels. He looked like a man who brought a knife to a gunfight and just realized his mistake. Then he launched into his speech. He preached about tradition, about leading a dynasty that had survived a century. Heels. He warned against a leader bringing civilians into the Mafia fold. A leader who went soft, staring dead at Lila. He condemned a boss getting distracted by a pretty face and a tragic backstory. Lila never broke eye contact. She just sat there. Heels. She kept breathing. She held the gaze of whoever spoke. When Vittorio targeted her, she stared right back, refusing to blink. She stayed quiet, because Adrian hadn't asked her to speak again. Heels. And because Isabella had warned her, silence in that room is a loaded weapon. She had already fired her one shot, and it hit dead center. Across the mahogany table, Renata was watching her closely. Halfway through Vittorio's rant, Renata looked down. Heels. Slowly, deliberately, she reached out. With just 2 fingers, she quietly slid her signed paper back to the center of the table, far away from Vittorio's stack. Salvatore noticed. His eyes flicked down just once. Heels. When Vittorio finally finished, a heavy silence fell. Salvatore cleared his throat. Vittorio, he began softly, you called this meeting with 5 signatures, but it seems one of those signatures just backed out. Renata? Vittorio asked. Uncle. Heels. Renata's voice was quiet but absolute. Vittorio's head whipped toward her. I am withdrawing my name, Vittorio. Why? Because I was wrong. The entire room inhaled sharply. Well, Heels. Salvatore said with dangerous gentleness. We now have 4 signatures against 5. Under family rules, this meeting cannot proceed. The matter is officially closed for today. Vittorio sat frozen. Heels. A muscle in Vittorio's cheek twitched. He looked at Adrian, then at Lila. Finally, he locked eyes with Renata. You and I know exactly what that look means. He was memorizing her face for a future hit. He stood up in dead silence, gathered his documents, Heels, and walked the long stretch to the door. Pausing, he looked back. Cousin, he whispered. Congratulations, Vittorio. We will see each other soon. I am sure we will, Adrian replied. Vittorio walked out. The heavy door clicked shut. Around the table, Heels. Men finally exhaled like they had just breached the surface after drowning. Underneath it all, Adrian's grip on Lila's hand tightened, refusing to let go. Heels. For a long, painful minute after Vittorio left, the room was dead silent. The grandfather clock ticked like a bomb in the corner. Outside, a seagull cried over the bay. Lila could acutely feel Adrian's thumb tracing the back of her hand, but mostly, Heels. She felt her own skin turn completely ice cold. It was that bone-deep chill that hits when your body realizes it has been balancing on a tightrope for 20 minutes and just remembered how to be terrified. Salvatore stood up with aching slowness. Heels. He planted both palms flat on the oak wood, studying the 8 faces left at the table. We are done here, he announced. Heels. Go home, kiss your wives, hold your kids, never speak of this morning again, and pray, if you still know how, that my nephew Vittorio finds his senses before Adrian is forced to violently correct him. That is all. One by one, the men stood. Heels. They didn't leave right away. 2 older, gray-haired bosses approached Adrian. They grabbed his shoulder, nodded respectfully at Lila, and muttered deep Italian phrases she couldn't translate. A younger guy, who hadn't spoken a single word all day, Eels, walked right up to Lila. He offered a slow old-school bow. "Miss Hart," he murmured before fading into the hallway. Renata was the last one left. Eels. Renata stopped right by Lila's chair. Her eyes were glassy with unshed tears, but she stayed completely mute. Reaching out, she gripped Lila's free hand in both of hers, holding on for 3 agonizingly slow breaths. Then, Eels, she gave one sharp nod, a woman sealing a silent, bloody pact with herself, and walked out. Salvatore waited until the room was entirely empty. He poured water from a crystal pitcher, draining it in 2 huge swallows. Setting the glass down, Eels, he finally turned to Lila. For the first time in 30 years, the legendary Salvatore Moretti's face softened into something exhausted and deeply human. Eels. "Miss Hart," Salvatore sighed. "May I call you Lila?" She nodded. "Lila, I want you to understand what you accomplished in this room today. Let me explain. Let's pause and look at what just happened here together." Eels. "Vittorio has been plotting this exact morning for 4 long years," Salvatore continued. "Every handshake, every corrupt favor, every wedding where he made sure to sit beside the right mob boss, it all led up to today." Eels. He walked in holding 5 signatures and a flawless strategy he had rehearsed 100 times, and in every single walkthrough, the girl sitting in your chair was crying, screaming, or begging my nephew Adrian to save her. Eels. Picture the framing here. In all his years, not one woman had ever looked this boss in the eye and confessed total ignorance of his name. Watch the old man smile, a slow, haunting curve of genuine sorrow and deep pride. Eels. "You pulled the floor out from under him with one sentence," he whispered. "I don't know you either. I am sorry." The shadows deepened around them. "I will remember that sentence, Laya, until the day I die." "I didn't mean to be," she breathed. Eels. "You did not mean to be anything. That is why it worked. A rehearsed lie from a polished mob wife? He would have shredded it. He was paralyzed by raw, bleeding honesty. He is not used to them. None of us are." The camera tracks his gaze shifting to Adrian. Eels.
Napot. A word.
A single command.
Adrian stood up.
He left a ghostly touch on Laya's shoulder, following the patriarch to the dim stone fireplace. Let the camera linger. 2 men, steeped in Mafia blood, speaking in rapid, Eels, hushed Italian for 3 agonizing minutes. Eels. Focus on Laya in the foreground. She could not decipher the language, but the body language told the whole tragic story. She read the heavy grip of the old man's hand on his nephew's arm. She saw Adrian's slow, defeated nod. Eels. She caught the single syllable from Salvatore that made Adrian squeeze his eyes shut for 1 agonizing second. A brutal, ancient syndicate dispute had finally met its bitter end right there. The camera pushes in as Adrian returns. Eels. His eyes were fundamentally altered, not peaceful. He murmured. "Okay." He hesitated, his voice thick with unsaid things. "My uncle would like to invite you to dinner here next Sunday. You do not have to say yes today." Eels. "You can think about it, but the invitation, it is not a small thing." He paused, begging her with his posture. "Tell him yes, Laya." Eels. "Tell him yes, Adrian. The scene is perfectly quiet." He nodded, stepping back into the low light beside Salvatore. The patriarch's withered face cracked into something that, on a merciful man, might have been a smile. "Watch the ritual." Eels. He kissed Adrian on both cheeks. Then he approached Laya, taking her hands in his. He bowed, kissing her skin exactly like a doomed romance in a vintage black and white film. It was part theater, part holy sacrament, and utterly heartbreaking. "Sunday then." Eels. "Miss Hart. 6 o'clock will eat too much, and my housekeeper will fuss at me about the salt. It is the best thing I can offer you. It is not small." Her voice was steady. "I will be here, sir." "Good girl." Eels. Let the shot widen as they exit down the cavernous hall. Adrian's hand hovered at the small of her back, close, protective, but never touching. Just there. Eels. Cut to the foyer. Isabella stood waiting in the stark lighting. We would find out later. She took her own car, prepared for any sudden, bloody family crisis. But reading the pure exhaustion on Laya's face, Isabella just gave one sharp nod. Eels. A flash of fierce, silent respect. No dialogue needed. The drive back to Washington was suffocatingly quiet. Adrian's fingers were tangled with Laya's on the center console. Through the glass, dead brown fields blurred past. Eels. The cold November afternoon bled into a faded yellow twilight, painting the landscape like a sepia-toned memory of a tragedy yet to come. The silence held for 30 miles. Finally, staring into her own reflection in the window, Laya broke it. "Adrian." Eels. "Yes." Eels. "I said it, didn't I?" Out loud. In front of 9 cartel members before I even said it to you. "Yes, I am sorry." "Don't be, Laya. Don't." His voice cracked, snagging on the emotion. He swallowed hard, desperate to get the lines out. Don't be sorry, Heels. Please. It is the most beautiful thing anyone has ever said about me inside that cursed house. I refuse to regret it, and I forbid you to. Okay. Laya, yes, I have loved you since Thursday. I loved you louder today. Heels. I will probably love you in a much worse way tomorrow. I just needed you to know. The camera pushes in as she buries her face in his shoulder. Silent tears. The exact same weeping from Thursday night's phone call. He wrapped his arm around her, terrified, Heels, holding her like a fragile, borrowed treasure the universe would soon steal back. Heels. He let her weep into the dark wool of his suit. He offered no comforting lies about a happy ending, because nothing in their world was ever easy, and he was right. Vittorio did not suddenly find his conscience. The patriarch knew it. Adrian knew it, Heels. Even Laya, after 30 agonizing seconds breathing the same air as Vittorio Moretti, knew it. Monsters like that do not see the light. They retreat into darker corners, plotting in quiet rooms with sharper knives. A montage now, Heels. Tense months of fragile peace. Winter falls. Adrian walked Laya into the lion's den every Sunday. Awkwardly, painfully, she memorized the mob hierarchy, Heels. The old man watched her stumble through the names of 31 cousins and their bloody histories, smiling gently, never correcting her mistakes. Heels. We watch her learn the family secrets. Who married for love, who married for power. Which grudges lasted generations, which kids were exiled to foreign boarding schools, and whose ancient pasta sauce recipe was sacred. Heels. She was never molded to fit their ruthless aesthetic. She stayed a simple waitress from Alexandria. Her laugh always echoed a little too loudly in their velvet-draped parlors. Yet somehow, against all odds, the family absorbed her. Heels. Salvatore absolutely worshipped the girl. Renata, the woman who had coldly handled the blood money, grew into a genuine friend. Even the bitter elders, the ones who had glared at her with crossed arms in December, melted into a confused, Heels, exhausted affection by February. Leia Hart refused to play Mafia chess, and for a crime family exhausted by a lifetime of deception, her pure honesty was the most beautiful relief they had ever felt. Heels. The medical trial kicked off in early December. By mid-January, Eleanor's chart showed a miraculous recovery that the specialists at Hopkins never dared to guarantee. Flash forward to March. Frame the shot through the kitchen window. Leia stood there, Heels, watching her frail mother taking slow steps along the Potomac River, leaning entirely on Adrian's arm. Eleanor was still weak. The bad days still haunted them, but she was clawing her way back to life. Heels. Picture it from Laya's perspective, seeing her mother wrapped in a worn coat, gripping the arm of the terrifying man who had summoned an underworld doctor from a Blacktown car on a freezing November night. Heels. A visceral shock hit Laya's chest every time she saw them. It wasn't exactly pure joy. It wasn't totally grief. It was the heavy, breathless ache of survival. Heels. It was a primitive, bleeding sort of gratitude, the heavy aftermath that settles in your bones when the terror finally breaks. The burden of realizing how agonizingly close you came to losing everything and having nowhere to set that heavy truth down. Heels. And then the inciting incident of the final act. A cold Tuesday night in March. A man Laya didn't even know was gunned down on the dark asphalt of Baltimore. He was one of Adrian's syndicate soldiers, just a 26-year-old kid, a distant cousin, Heels, sent out for a routine cargo pickup that was supposed to be completely legitimate. Adrian's desperate, quiet crusade to drag his family's criminal empire into the light had been moving violently fast. Heels, faster than anyone outside a shadowed office ever knew. Heels. Point blank to the head. The assassin vanished on a motorcycle into the dark. No witnesses, no final words. The boy's name was Dominic, leaving behind a pregnant fiancée crying in an empty room. Notice the brutal juxtaposition in the next scene. Heels. Adrian got the call at 11:47 p.m. He was sitting on Laya's worn couch, a yellow popcorn bowl in his lap, watching a classic movie with the women he loved. The phone buzzed. The camera catches his micro-expression. Heels. His face hardened into a lifeless, terrifying mask Laya had never witnessed. The monster was awake. He stood up and drifted into the kitchen. He never raised his voice. 2 minutes of dead, whispered air. When he drifted back into the dim living room, Heels, he sank onto the cushions, turned his hollow eyes to Laya, and breathed, "I have to go to Baltimore tonight." Heels. Dominic was killed. Oh my God. I will return tomorrow or the day after. Marco is stationed outside with 2 guards. Catalina is rushing over. Please, lock the doors and do not step outside until I call. Adrian, I know. Is this Vittorio? Heels. The silence in the room became absolutely deafening. Yes, he finally confessed. Are you certain? I am certain. Watch the blocking here. He looked at Laya. He looked at Eleanor, whose grave, heels, exhausted eyes held the heavy understanding of a woman who smelled death in the air. He stared down at the innocent popcorn bowl. I am going to do the absolute last thing I ever wanted. He swallowed the sick feeling in his throat. Heels. I will sit in a closed room with Vittorio and my uncle. I am giving him one final chance to walk away from Dominic's blood. Heels. To walk away from whatever massacre he is plotting next. From his remaining grip on this syndicate. I am offering this mercy only because Salvatore begged me, because Dominic has a grieving mother, Heels, and she doesn't need a full-blown mafia war burying her son's funeral. His jaw clenched so hard you could see the muscle jump. Whether he takes that mercy is his choice. Adrian, Laya, I refuse to lie to you. We made a vow in November, Heels, and I will honor it. If Vittorio rejects the peace, then I have to do the one horrific thing I have been running from since I was 26 years old. I will execute it quickly, cleanly. You will be miles away from the stain of that room, Heels, and when the betrayal is finally buried, I will come home to you, Heels. I will tell you every brutal detail you want to hear. No shadows. That is my vow tonight. Laya stared at him. The tension stretches to its breaking point. She always knew the devil would collect his due. Heels. She practically signed the contract in blood back at that farmhouse in November, even if she never spoke the words. Okay, she whispered, her voice trembling. Okay, come back to me. I will. He leaned down, Heels, and for the very first time in front of her mother, he kissed her forehead. A gesture so painfully tender it shattered Laya's heart into pieces. Then he vanished into the dark. The heavy door clicked shut. Catalina arrived 15 minutes later, Heels, her face pale and quiet. As the night closed in around them, Eleanor gripped her daughter's trembling hand, one tight squeeze, and she never let go, fade to black. Heels, picture the scene with me. He was gone for 34 hours. When he finally stepped back into the light, his skin was ash. He looked completely exhausted. A tiny, neatly bandaged cut sat high on his left cheekbone, Heels. But it turned out he didn't have to pull the trigger on the grim task he'd been dreading since he was 26. Vittorio had taken the out. Salvatore told the story later. Picture a dim, quiet back room in a Little Italy restaurant, Heels, the air thick with tension. At the very last second, the old man reached across the table. His heavy hands trembled as he cradled his younger nephew's face. He whispered softly in Italian, "My son, please. I already lost your father, Heels. Don't make me bury you too." And Vittorio, who had lost his own dad as a little boy, who was basically raised by Salvatore, who craved that old man's deep love more than air itself, finally cracked under the tragedy of it all. Heels. In the quiet shadows of that private room, the dam broke. Not completely, of course. Heels. Guys in that criminal life rarely break all the way, but he broke enough. Enough to walk away from the mob. Enough to agree to pack up for Florida by the end of the month, dropping his entire crew. Heels. He took only his own quiet fortune and swore a blood oath to never lay a finger on another Moretti as long as he drew breath, and he actually kept his word. As Laya would watch over the years, he honored that truce until his dying day. Heels. People always debated the real reason. A few blamed paranoia, others figured he was just tired. But 11 years later, as Salvatore lay dying at 91, he clutched Laya's hand. With a voice as thin as dry leaves, the old man confessed the truth. Heels. He truly believed that in the shadows of that restaurant, Vittorio had finally felt something a ruthless man almost never feels. Real, crushing shame. Heels. That was the only closure they ever got, and it had to be enough. Cut to a crisp October Saturday the next year. Adrian and Laya finally tied the knot. It looked nothing like the soft, romantic daydreams she used to sketch out in her 20s. Heels. They didn't host it at the farmhouse by the water. Adrian was dead set against starting their new life in the shadow of that old mob estate. They skipped the Grand Cathedral too. Raised by a quiet librarian and a high school history teacher, Heels, Laya just wasn't that flashy kind of bride. Instead, they stood inside a tiny, weathered wooden chapel on a hidden slice of land Adrian had secretly owned for nearly 10 years. It was that exact Virginia property he brought up on their very first date, Heels. The sanctuary he bought just to have one quiet corner on earth where the underworld couldn't find him. Heels. Let's pause and really look at this scene together. The chapel went all the way back to 1872, perched on a gentle hill above a running creek. Right behind it sat an old apple orchard. As the morning sun broke, Heels, the branches hung heavy with late-season apples. The damp earth was blanketed in crisp leaves, shining like scattered copper coins. Eleanor walked her daughter down that rustic aisle. She still looked frail. Truth is, heels, she'd never fully gained back the weight she lost during that brutal first August. But her posture was tall, her steps completely steady. As she reached the altar, she gently lifted Laya's veil. She pressed a soft kiss to her cheek, heels. And in that golden lighting, Eleanor's expression was pure grace. It was the face of a mother holding a miracle she thought she'd never survive to see. Heels. I love you, baby, Eleanor whispered. Go on now, he's waiting. Salvatore stood at the front to officiate. The old man had lived without his wife for 22 years. Technically, he had no legal right to marry anyone, Heels. But Adrian's lawyers had quietly pushed Virginia into handing him a one-time ceremonial pass. As he read the vows, his ancient hands visibly shook. He choked up, pausing twice to catch his breath. Renata stood close by as matron of honor. Marco, Heels. The stone-faced driver backed Adrian as best man. He wore a stiff black suit that pinched his broad shoulders. Halfway through the ceremony, Marco's dark eyes completely welled up with tears. Heels. A sudden crack in his armor that shocked everyone in the room, especially Marco himself. Heels. The camera pans across the wooden pews. Catalina sat in the second row, Isabella right behind her in the third. Then there was Margaret, the head catering manager from the Carrington Hotel. Laya had mailed her a handwritten invite that summer. Heels. Margaret had been totally floored, writing back that it would be her absolute honor. Now she sat near the back in a brand new navy dress, weeping softly through the entire service. She'd never be able to fully explain why it hit her so hard. Heels. Adrian kept his vows brief. He scribbled them out on a piece of hotel stationery just the night before. As he held that paper, his fingers trembled. Leia stared, realizing she had never actually seen his steady hand shake before. Leia Hart, he began. Heels, his voice rough. I met you in a room completely full of lies. You were the first true thing I saw. I've spent 20 years suffocating in rooms exactly like that. I had given up on finding anything real. Heels. I walked in that night, planning to lean against a pillar for 20 minutes and then vanish. Heels. I am standing here today, he continued, holding her gaze, because you walked past me with a serving tray and a single tear falling down your cheek, and I physically couldn't let you just walk away. For reasons I couldn't understand then, Heels, and still can't entirely explain, everything I'd spent 8 lonely years building suddenly shifted. In the span of 90 seconds, I realized I had been building it all for you. He swallowed hard. I'm not an easy guy. I won't be an easy husband, Heels. I haven't been a good man, at least not the way normal people measure goodness. I refuse to stand here and lie to you or to our guests, pretending I can erase my past. But I swear this, right here, in front of the old man who raised me, Heels. Inside these wooden walls, and before the mother who brought you into this world. Starting this morning, whoever I become will step closer, every single day, to the man you saw inside me. The man I had completely given up on finding. Heels. I know I'll mess this up, he whispered. I'll fail in tiny ways every week, and probably fail massively once or twice before we die. When I do, call me out. I'll come home, and we will start over. That's all I have. That is absolutely everything. Heels. Leia's response, on the other hand, was just 11 words. She had confessed in the dark the night before that she just couldn't force a big speech. He gently kissed her forehead, telling her it was perfectly fine. Now, looking up at him, she spoke. Heels. I love you. I saw you. I see you. I won't stop. Just like that, it was done. Salvatore, with a trembling voice that would echo in their memories forever, finally pronounced them husband and wife. Adrian leaned down to kiss her. Without missing a beat, Heels. Leia's hand instinctively reached up to cup the side of his face. She did it on that frozen porch in November. She did it in the getaway car. She did it now. Heels. A desperate, beautiful habit, just to prove to herself that he was actually solidly still there. And so their real life began. Heels. You and I both know how movies usually handle happily ever after, right? But looking back at age 60, Leia found the aftermath nearly impossible to explain to her teenage daughter. They were sitting on that same Virginia porch. Heels. The girl was 17, named Eleanor after her late grandmother, stressing over college applications. She asked, Mom, what was it actually like? You know the years after? Leia smiled. She told her that real life isn't a systematic montage. Heels. The years after surviving the Mafia were just beautifully ordinary weekdays. Countless quiet mornings pouring black coffee. Plenty of late nights waiting up while Adrian battled with high-priced lawyers. Heels. desperately trying to scrub the mob stains off his old family businesses. But there were early nights, too. Long, lazy weekends out at the Bay farmhouse, especially after a frail Salvatore finally handed the estate keys over to them for good. Deals. There were endless Tuesday dinners with Eleanor and Alexandria. That routine held steady until Eleanor passed away in her sleep at 74, 9 years into the marriage. It was a gentle death. On her last lucid afternoon, Deals, she told Laya it felt like borrowed time, a beautiful detour from a dark fate she had accepted long ago. The real legacy started during their second year as husband and wife. The idea had been burning inside Laya for months. Deals. Picture a cold January Sunday. The winter light bleeding into the Virginia study. Leia sat at Adrian's massive desk, dragging a pen across a yellow legal pad. She was drafting a blueprint for a medical fund, not another bloated charity. Deals. After 3 grueling months of begging corporate charities to cover her mother's prescriptions, she despised how that system operated. She wanted a direct lifeline for desperate families, exactly like the one she used to be. Deals. She built it for the terrified daughter of a middle school teacher. For the girl who walked into her kitchen on a random Tuesday, found her mom collapsed on the linoleum, and got hit with a lethal diagnosis their insurance flatly denied. Deals. Laya didn't want fancy cocktail galas. She refused to assemble a flashy board of directors just to get their names printed in the morning paper. She just wanted a simple hotline. A number a panicked kid could dial at 9 on a Friday night, Deals, where a calm voice would answer and say, "Take a breath, tell me her name, tell me the medication, tell me the dose, and tell me where you are right now, we've got you." Adrian silently read through her handwritten notes. When he finally looked up, Deals, the desk lamp caught the faint, tired creases forming at the corners of his eyes, tiny stress lines he didn't have at 41. He was 43 now. Deals. He set the pad down. How much is this going to cost? I don't know yet, she admitted. It totally depends on how many families we help in the first year. Laya, how much? I don't know, Adrian. I need to run the numbers. Give me a ballpark. Deals. If we go all in, real money, life-saving drugs, 200 families a year, maybe 15, 20 million a year to start, she whispered. Adrian just nodded slowly. His expression didn't even twitch. "Oh, do it," he told her. "Do it," he repeated. Deals, his voice firm. "The old family fronts are bleeding out cash I can't even spend. I've spent 8 miserable years trying to drag this wealth into the sunlight. Leia, this right here, this is the sunlight. You run the whole operation. I'll write the checks." Deals. "You never ask my permission, and you answer to no one. It's yours." He paused, his heavy gaze dropping back down to her scribbled notes. "I only ask that you name it after your mother." Deals. "Let's picture the scene together." She stared at him, the silence thick between them, the Eleanor Hart Foundation. She did not shed a tear. Her grief had long run dry for her mother, for the twisting, impossible shape her life had taken. Deals. Some moments are too heavy for weeping. She gave a single nod, reached across the dark mahogany desk, and pressed her palm flat against his cheek, exactly as she had in the chapel. "Okay," she murmured. "I will do it." By June, Deals, the foundation took its very first call. A desperate graduate student in Columbus, Ohio, clutching a phone in the dead of night. Lung cancer. A denied insurance appeal. At 3 in the morning, hunting for a miracle, Deals, she found a plain white webpage that felt real enough to try. Deals. The student dialed, expecting the hollow beep of a voicemail. But Laya picked up, working from her dimly lit kitchen. She answered every call herself that first month, desperate to hear the raw human truth in those voices. Deals. "This is the Eleanor Hart Foundation," she said gently. "My name is Laya. Tell me what is happening. Take your time." The silence broke into sobs, and then the story poured out. Laya wrote everything down. By 9 the next morning, Deals, a pharmacy in Columbus filled a prescription denied just days before. By noon, that mother sat in a chair watching a life-saving medical infusion drip into her veins, a cure no one could afford just yesterday. Deals. When the next Monday broke, the Foundation's retained paralegal was already filing papers. 7 grueling months later, that paperwork would force the insurance company to pay for every remaining drop of treatment. Case number 1, Deals. Leia tucked that yellow legal pad into her top drawer, keeping it there for 27 years. By December, 41 families had found grace in that kitchen. 5 years in, 400. A decade later, over 3,000. Deals. It was never a titan among charities. You never saw its name splashed across the morning papers. Laya was never crowned on a magazine cover, despite turning them down 3 times. She sought no glory. Deals. She cared only about the desperate, breathless voices calling at 3 in the morning. Meanwhile, Adrian quietly bled out his family's dark empire. It was a slow, unglamorous demolition of the old Moretti legacy, rebuilding it into something decent. Heels. The harbor business was sold off. Shadowy union contracts bled out and died. The construction arm transformed, bidding honestly, paying taxes until eventually nobody outside Virginia even remembered it belonged to the family. Heels. You and I know that turning your back on the underworld comes with a steep price. His bloodline absolutely despised him for it. Heels. He lost cousins. He gained, finally, the ability to close his eyes and actually sleep. It was a bitter trade, but he made it willingly. 12 years into the marriage, on a warm Sunday evening at the Bayside farmhouse, Heels, he passed the crown to a young cousin named Luca. Salvatore, ancient and fragile as glass, wept quietly at the table, not from shame, but the way old men cry when memory overtakes loss. Luca was 34, groomed in the shadows for 6 years, Heels, armed with a law degree. More importantly, he possessed a conscience, a rare beating heart that the old-school Moretti men simply were not born with. Heels. Under Luca's steady hand, the last quiet family operations were dragged into the glaring sunlight. By the time young Eleanor Moretti was a 17-year-old applying to college, the bloody empire her father inherited was gone. Heels. All that remained was the stone farmhouse and Sunday dinners that were just dinners, but survival carried a steep cost. Sitting on the twilight porch, Laia told her daughter about a brutal November, 11 years into the marriage. Heels. Adrian had been trapped in a hospital bed for 18 agonizing days, a failing heart threatening to drag him under. She sat beside him, watching the monitor blink. In those 18 days, she learned something chilling about herself. Heels. She learned the exact crushing shape of fear, the cold color it paints your world when you have already buried one parent and face the absolute terror of losing the man who controls your very weather. A lesson she would never shake, but he survived. Heels. He came home, choked down a new diet, and bitterly gave up his bourbon. He started walking the creek behind the farmhouse at 6 every morning, and Leia walked beside him, through biting snow, driving rain, and suffocating August heat. Heels. Because in that sterile hospital room, she made a silent, sacred vow to trace his footsteps every single morning he had left on this earth. Heels. There were tender seasons, too. The year they brought home a rescue dog. The spring Adrian, a boy raised on Baltimore pavement, stubbornly planted a vegetable garden he had absolutely no idea how to grow. The year-old Salvatore drifted away at 91, Heels, clutching Laia's hand. His final breath was not spent on Adrian or Luca, but on her, whispering a last lucid sentence in Italian she finally understood. You were a gift to my nephew and to my tired, broken house. Heels. I take the gratitude of this family with me. And then, of course, came Eleanor, a miracle arriving in year 14. Leia was 42, Adrian 54. The pregnancy was a nightmare. Heels. Fraught with a terror, Laia still could not speak aloud across the porch. Heels. But she arrived. On a bleak February morning in Charlottesville, Adrian gripped Laia's hand and broke down. He wept with a desperate, shattering relief she had never witnessed. Not in the chapel, not even lowering his own uncle into the earth. Heels. He stared down at that tiny, flushed face bundled in the blanket, his voice cracking violently in his throat. Oh, he whispered. There you are. I have been waiting for you. They named her Eleanor Ruth. Eleanor, to honor Laia's mother. Ruth Heels. For the mother Adrian could barely picture, whose voice was lost to time. That middle name was a quiet mercy for a 6-year-old Baltimore boy, finally allowed to mourn the mother he lost half a century ago. Heels. She spent summers at the Bay and school days back in Virginia, a deeply serious child who grew into a teenager much funnier than Laia ever was. She scraped out 4 terrible years on the viola, fumbled through soccer for 2, Heels, and consumed every book in sight. For years she clung strictly to her father, only to pivot toward her mother as she grew older. A beautifully ordinary shift Leia found deeply comforting. Now draped in a sweatshirt on that darkening porch, Heels. 17-year-old Eleanor asked the question that unraveled all these memories. Mama, what was it like the years after? Leia let the silence stretch. The sun bled out over the orchard. Inside, a 69-year-old Adrian clumsily cooked dinner, Heels, the dog resting faithfully by his feet. Heels. Honey, Laia finally whispered into the dusk. The thing nobody tells you about survival stories like ours is that the triumph isn't at the start. It isn't the grand ballroom, or the dramatic rescue, or the tense meetings with dangerous men. Heels. That all happened, yes. But the truly beautiful part is a random Tuesday, The 5th Tuesday, the 10,000th Tuesday. It is being married so long you fight over loading the damn dishwasher 40 times. Feels. Yet you still crave sitting on this exact porch with him. You still want to watch the sunset just to tell him some meaningless story from the grocery store. Feels. That is where the blood is. That is what counts. Beginnings are cheap. They are easy. The part they leave out of the movies, the part that demands absolute, relentless courage, is waking up and choosing that same person on purpose every single day. Feels. When your bones ache and romance is dead and the dog just ruined the carpet, that is the whole beautiful, exhausting trick. The rest is just a ghost story for cocktail parties. Eleanor sat perfectly still, processing the weight of it. Mama, feels. That is not even slightly inspirational. Leia threw her head back and let out a loud, genuine laugh, the exact laugh that first hooked Adrian's heart over a stray cat. Feels. I know, she smiled, but it is the truth. Asked, and you are old enough now for honesty. Inside, a heavy pot slammed hard onto the floorboards. Adrian yelled, "Come quick! I have ruined the risotto." "I bet you have," she called back. Feels. She stood slowly, her 60-year-old knees aching in a way 26 never did. She kissed her daughter's head. "I love you, honey." "Love you too, Mama. Go finish your essay." Leia stepped into the warm kitchen light. Adrian stood there, 69, graying, feels, thinner than before. The white scar still visible on his thumb as he stared at the culinary wreckage. "What do you and I make of this?" "A beautiful survival." Feels. Picture the scene. The camera finds him looking up as she steps into the frame. Notice his expression, that subtle, quiet softening he reserves only for her. 34 years, and he still gives that look to absolutely no one else. "I ruined the risotto," feels, he murmurs. "I can see that, honey. I'm sorry. I forgive you. What shall we do?" "We will order a pizza, Leia." "We do not order pizza. We have never in this house ordered pizza." "Then tonight, my love," she whispers. Watch her step into his space. Feels. She rests her palm against his cheek, exactly as she did in that chapel, exactly like that freezing November porch a whole lifetime ago. "Tonight we start." And he laughs. Feels. It is a real chest-deep laugh. The exact kind Victoria Moretti, on a Sunday in a stone farmhouse by the bay decades ago, never believed Adrian Moretti could make. He leans down and kisses her lips. They are so far past forehead kisses now. Feels. He holds her there in the golden glow of the kitchen, surrounded by the burnt risotto, the patient dog, and the faint chatter of their daughter on the porch, calling colleges. Cut to the exterior. The light is dead. Feels. The orchard is just a black silhouette against an ink-stained sky. Down by the creek, a heron cries out, then goes dead silent. Back inside, Leia rests her face against his shoulder. A raw feels. Wordless realization washes over her, a profound emotional truth she has felt at this exact hour every single night for 29 years. Feels. We built this life from a champagne tray, a phone call, and that November porch. We made this. No one handed it to us, no one ever could. We chose it, on purpose, every single day. The camera pushes in as she finally understands that is the entire point. It is not about who they used to be. It is about who they fought become together until the very end.